Dr. Howard Lipp, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jesse. I'm happy to be here. It's a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, thanks for coming on. Before we get started, I'm going to give you a little introduction. Dr. Howard Lipp is what happens when a physicist, an engineer, a mystic, and a musician walk into the jungle and come back one person. He's also the founder of the Integration Institute and the Temple of Sound and Source, and you currently have a book coming out later this fall on consciousness and healing integration. With all that said, I'm honored to have you on the show. Thank you for coming on, and I'm really excited to hear more about your journey and kind of what your overall thoughts are on the whole psychedelic space, as well as attaching consciousness to everyday life, being that self-aware person.
Well, thanks, Jesse. It's been an interesting journey for me. I, was raised in a very religious home, synagogue, all of that, a lot of practices, a lot of traditions, but there wasn't a lot of this connection to something that I would think is greater than me. This great spirit that is spoken about in a lot of the religious doctrine. And I left that to look for the answers in the world of science, because that's what I also knew. I have a mind for science, have a mind for music. So I figured if religion couldn't answer the big question that was coming up about what is this and why are we here, then maybe science would give me a different approach and maybe get me closer to my answer. Well, it didn't, right? But it did eventually lead me to run headfirst into a wall with addiction. And it was through, suffering with addiction that I was led to treatment, that I was led to plant medicine, that I was led to a door that opened in the world of psychedelics that would change my view of everything. But most importantly, change the view of me and the belief that I was this broken thing that somehow needed to get fixed, and that my mind was something broken that needed to get fixed. And the interesting thing was I learned that I didn't suffer from addiction, and I didn't suffer from being broken. Those were just things that I was told by 12-step programs, by religion, by other people who have walked the road of abstinence only. And what I found was that there was never anything wrong with me, but there was a lot of my thinking that was really, really dysfunctional, and my belief systems that were really dysfunctional. And my self image was skewed by culture and by media and by religion and by family of origin and by all these different ways we think that we can be measured and that somehow become more in the future. And it was this chase that was set up in me from a very young age to be more, to do more, to achieve more, to seek this external validation that our culture so um, promotes to us as if it's going to make us be more worthy. And and that chase leads nowhere except to more chasing. And when I finally realized the callus on my forehead was caused by hitting a wall that I wasn't realizing was there in the form of addiction, that I started to look inward. And if it hadn't been for some friends in recovery who were really recovered, as I like to say it, recovered, because it is a past tense thing, I would never have found psychedelics. I was 40 years old before I took my first psychedelic. And I'm glad I waited. And I'm also grateful that I did what I did, because what I come to see, come to uncover, come to discover is that I was completely disconnected from the truth of who and what I am. I was disconnected from life. I was disconnected from the rest of the world. I had been separated, as our culture so neatly does, into all these little boxes, a box and a box and a box and a box, till I'm so far apart from the truth of what I am, which is simply nature. My nature is nature. I am a finite expression of an infinite creative force underneath everything in existence. And it was really coming to understand that. They started to see why I was so deeply suffering.
Could you share a little bit more about your first psychedelic experience? What was that like?
Well, actually, my first psychedelic experience was on the heels of being 9 months sober. So it was
Okay.
working with a plant medicine called Suma, and which is all about emotions and and energies trapped in the body, causing blockages in the natural flow of energy. And it was nothing short of, at first, an exercise in terror, because I walked into it sober, and I walked into it with a head full of, we never take anything that affects us from the neck up. And this whole belief that I picked up being a child of the beginning of the war on drugs, that I was going to lose my mind, destroy my DNA, and lose the plot permanently. And so for the first 15 minutes or so, before things really started to kick off, I was in quite a bit of fear. And then I asked the room full of people who were all, neatly in their places, laid down with their blindfolds and their headphones and waiting for things to happen. When I asked the question, what's the longest anybody's been afraid in here? And what came back at me was not a bunch of comforting statements. It was some really uncomfortable laughter from most of the people. And I realized that that uncertainty was natural, but that they were coming back because they also knew that that there was help from it. And I experienced some things I never thought possible. I experienced my birth, which I have to say was beyond what I thought possible, and yet thought possible, right? Because we have this tape recorder called the subconscious, which basically is recording everything that happens to us from the moment it comes online. But I had no idea that it came online so early in our formation as humans. So I experienced pre-birth, I experienced my birth, I experienced several previous deaths. But what was most, I think, fascinating about the experience is that I got to witness this and to be in the experience as the one going through the birth at the same time, which, didn't really seem like it was possible to be
Yeah.
both the witness and the experience. And yet it taught me something, that there's more to who we think we are than this mind or this body, that there's an awareness that supersedes it, precedes it, that is here prior to, but also aware of, even in the midst of the mind being involved in the whole experience. And that just floored me, the ability to actually be the experience and witness it at the same time.
That's the funny thing about psychedelics for me, doing ayahuasca most recently, and what you're saying is so true. I grew up in a religious family. I went to Catholic school even, and there was church quite often, but I was part of a religious community, but I didn't really know what believing was because I hadn't seen it, or I wasn't ready to see it quite yet. That miracle that you're talking about, what doesn't seem possible. And what you're describing is essentially your first miracle that you're witnessing. And that's what makes it just so special. So you experienced the multiple deaths and then the rebirths in your first experience. And
I
what did
did
you say the psychedelic was? Suma?
a soma, which is a Hindu
Soma.
plant medicine. It's where the word
Okay.
somatic
Okay.
experience comes from.
I see.
And then, I very quickly, I did a bunch of those, and then that process sort of stopped really going forward. And so at that same time, I was introduced to the Queen of the Forest, grandmother, ayahuasca.
Yeah.
And that was another experience on a whole another level, because there wasn't a lot of cosmic or interdimensional aspects to the Soma experience. It was more experiencing vignettes of life where emotions had been stuck or hadn't processed. But ayahuasca is a whole nother experience into the transcendent, transpersonal, transdimensional world of psychedelic journeying. And that was when I really recognized that I could be the observer and actually observe how my mind was the source of my struggle, that actually there was something here that was uniquely me, that was not local, that was not trapped in this body, but was actually operating this body. And then meeting the great mystery underneath it and recognizing that it's not what any of us have been told.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not surprising. Religion may have gotten its origins in writing down psychedelic journeys, but they've since been passed off as history as opposed to mythology. And that's where, these stories that we experience in the psychedelic realms with ayahuasca or with psilocybin or iboga or any of them, there's more to it than just what meets the eye. To try to take them literally is almost ridiculously diminishing to the quality and the power of what's really being taught, and actually freezes the possibility of the long-term understanding that will come when these experiences are viewed again and again and again, not even by going back to the well and taking more of these plants, but to just revisit the experience, because there's so many layers to what we experience in these journeys.
Right. There's you mentioned earlier the war on drugs, and I feel like there was a concerted effort to hide the superpower from a lot of people. And as you mentioned, it's more history than it is mythology. I understand there being a reckless, I would say, distribution of these psychedelics, and when the government gets a hold of it, these things end up not being as pure. But at the same time, it's like you said, it's been withheld from just common knowledge. It's not something that's ever talked about. And on top of that, other things that aren't taught, that don't require any kind of substance, is meditation. You said it's all about the mind, right? We're always in our heads, and that's what causes a lot of struggles. It really is. And that's what makes ayahuasca so beautiful, is that neuroplasticity. And when you're able to understand that there's certain practices you can use to kind of work through your own problems, through meditation, through journaling, through just talking with God in that inner voice, those are all tools, post integration, that you can use. But these are things that are just not talked about in general education.
No, one of the things, excuse me, I've just written about is the
Oh, lost him for a second. I'll keep the show going while we wait for him to come back. As we were saying, actually, what I'll do is I'll just, So as we were kind of talking about let's add him back to the stage here. We'll get him back in. Okay. I think we're back.
Yeah, we are.
Okay. All right.
Perfect.
You were just writing about something.
Yeah, no, I wrote about just this concept that really keeps coming up in all the years of doing plant medicine, because I've facilitated and I've experienced and I've done hundreds, literally hundreds, and walked a lot of people through them, especially in integration. And the concept that psychology works with today is that your consciousness is emergent from neurology and from biochemistry. And what I've come to see with psychedelics is that's not true. That there is an essence to you, to me, call it the soul, higher self, highest self, whatever you want to call it. But there's an essential self that is neither local nor timeless, that your essence is not emergent from biology and neurology, that it is not strictly just the byproduct of the nurture of whatever environment you grew up with and in. That in fact, and this became not just apparent from my own psychedelic journeys and those with others, but when my son was born 9 years ago, there was a personality and a preference there from day one. There was an essence that was unarguably him, that had nothing to do with his experience of life, that had nothing to do with anything except this is who he was when he arrived, the original blueprint, whatever you want to call it. And it wasn't being produced by this neural chemistry, because he hadn't had enough experience living in that body to have any of that. He had just literally come out of the womb and into the world. And that sent me thinking, but it also set me looking. And, so I've written a white paper on it, actually, the myth of emergence, and the fact that there's something that's inarguably you, that is your essential nature that existed before you inhabited this body. I mean, Zen even talks about it, that one of the favorite koans is like asking you to give me something that demonstrates that you know who you were before your parents had you. And of course, it's impossible to do because we can't connect with that yet. It's pointing to the fact that there was somebody already there before you actually incarnated. And that's been my experience. And the work, of mystical realism, of how we see integration, is that there is your essential self, and then there's a lot of pollution that's been picked up by culture and family that is in your mind. And Epictetus said this. He was a Greek philosopher. And there were others before, and many cultures in many lineages recognize this essential nature, that you are a spirit having a human experience, and that you are more than your mind, and that the suffering of the moment is only the suffering caused by your mind's interpretation of the moment that you're in, based on all the different opinions and beliefs that it took on as to who it thinks you are, and what we use to decide what makes you measure up as a human. And that, 1800 or so years ago, when psychedelics were basically taken off the table in religious orders, in most anyway, especially the Judeo-Christian, because of the influence of the Vatican on that, especially Pope Benedict, that psychedelics were taken off the table. So, someone once asked recently, whatever caused the end of mythology and prophecy? And I would say what caused the end of prophecy was the end of psychedelic use by the prophets, for lots of reasons. And then actually this connection that we are disconnected from, this nature that we are disconnected from, our nature, all of life, including how we see each other as different somehow because of all the things our culture has created, that our suffering is not because you live over there and I'm over here, because you're Catholic and I'm Jewish, or because they're Muslim and they're Christian, or because they're in Iran or they're in Russia. It has more to do with the fact that we've created these institutions to begin with that separate us from the fact that we're all just finite expressions of what clearly is an infinitely creative force underneath this experience of nature. And that's what the plants are here to remind us ultimately. It's not to make you successful. It's not to make your dreams come true. It's to help you remember you're a part of this and to come back into balance with life, with nature. Anyway, I could go on this subject. I love it.
It's very grounding. And I think the perfect example when you say psychedelics and nature that I can think of immediately is how the 10 Commandments were seen. There's a theory that the burning bush, supposedly akasha, and when akasha burns, it emits DMT. After the burning bush was seen or inhaled, then the 10 Commandments came in. There was your prophecy. The essential moral compass to society were these rules of treating one another with respect. And I think that's something, like you're saying, that has been just completely removed when we talk about institutions. When we're given certain medications to make us feel better about ourselves, we're not grounding ourselves further. Instead, we're numbing that voice inside of us, and we're forgetting what actually connects us, because instead we're connecting ourselves to something that's actually synthetic. And it's really caused a lot of issues in modern day, and it's driven us away from that spirituality and driven us more towards maybe what the government tells us.
Well, I think authoritarianism and the dominator culture is about disconnecting you from the truth of you and of nature in order to surrender your will to an authority. I think one of the greatest harms ever perpetrated on human beings by religion and by government is the belief that some authority exists outside of us, that we do not have the power of this authority, that we are not worthy of it, nor are we smart enough, pure enough, clean enough, holy enough to make our own choices in the world, that we need someone else to make that connection and do that for us. And I think that has been one of the deepest causes of our suffering, because in fact, these 10 sayings that came from the burning bush, are simplified into one statement, which is, if you treat people, if you treat things the way you'd want to be treated, then it would work just fine. Treat people as you wish to be treated. Treat the earth as you would want the earth to treat you. Be in right relationship with each other and with all of life, because from my understanding, the 10 commandments, or the 10 sayings, as the actual authentic translation of the Hebrew goes, are actually 5 and 5. There's 5 on our relationships with each other, which are the most important. And then there are the 5 about our relationships with this external authority. But nowhere in there does it say that it's outside of you. And in fact, the ancient Aboriginal First Nations understanding of what this Hebrew was saying is that this great mystery is a part of all things. You, me, the air you breathe, the chair you sit on, and that if you want to connect with that, and Jesus spoke of this, you won't find it in a temple of stone and glass or steel. You'll find it in nature. And that's why the plants are here calling us to remind us of this, because we're so disconnected from everything, including believing that somehow this earth is possessed by some, or the dominion of some evil emperor, undefeatable by God. If you really think about that, we have the infinite power of the infinite creative force of the universe, who accidentally creates something that seems to have as much power as it does. Is by definition a contradiction, but logic and reason and religious doctrine don't necessarily inhabit the same mind at the same time. And that's part of it, is that we have been disempowered intentionally. Christianity, which was, Jesus' way was ancient Kabbalah, which is basically that the great mystery is an abundant wellspring of giving, this creative force that connects life, and that its entire purpose of this creation is for the creator to deliver maximum delight to the creature through creation. And that is the nature of the relationship between, quote, God and us, is that here's the abundant wellspring, and here's this amazing world. And as long as you stay in balance and interdependence and interconnectedness with it, this thing works like magic. And we're suffering because we disconnected from that, and we've been out of balance with that for probably about 150 years, and by and large. And look how much damage we've caused in that much time. That's not a lot of time considering geologic history.
No, it's actually kind of, it's a really short period. And if you think about the last 150 years, what's happened? School, 9 to 5 corporations, industrial revolution. I could go on, but it seems like as I kind of said earlier, the government or the world leaders feel like they are God, but they're not. And that's kind of what I think our society really gets sucked into. And that's establishing that difference between government and God is incredibly crucial to, I think, one's mental health personally, because once you have that faith in the Lord, and you know that God is inside of you, just like God created all of us, we have God inside of us because we continue to create things as well. We create families, we can create gardens, which, by the way, we're supplied by God, but we carry on that work and all these little gifts. There's a reason why a cow is here. There's a reason why it has multiple stomachs and it emits a certain gas. There's everything that's here right now in this world is here for a reason. None of it is by accident.
None of it is by accident. I think one of our biggest challenges as humans is we've been seduced into believing that there is an authority outside of us, that government is necessary, and that government is a leader rather than a service. And that's the mistake that really we've made, is that we put them in a position of leadership, which really means dominion over us, rather than humbly in service to the greatest good. because life operates that way. It's in balance. It forces and encourages balance. And we're suffering because we're out of balance. We will find balance again, whether it's imposed upon us by life circumstances or the earth taking back the balance that's needed, or whether we choose, because we have an adolescent attitude towards technology. We think something is a great idea. Wow, we figure out a way to make it profitable, and boom, it's implemented. And 50 or 100 years may go by before we start to see the consequences of that and go, maybe industrialization with fossil fuels wasn't the best idea. Maybe cutting down all these forests without a second thought for how much oxygen they provide might not have been a great idea. Maybe making plastics without recognizing that they do not completely decompose and recycle on their own, but actually just break into smaller pieces and get into everywhere, and that's dangerous.
Including your body.
Exactly. Maybe we shouldn't have created forever chemicals like dioxin and PFAs. Maybe that pesticides like DDT weren't the best idea, but we didn't study these things to the depth that we needed to. And our governments have given corporations the carte blanche to control. There's no way that we should be allowing companies to safety test their own products. We do more to test and the safety of electrical products than we do for pharmaceutical products, actually. United Laboratories does a hell of a lot more thorough testing on whether or not that power supply for your laptop is safe for a consumer product than we do for, say, a vaccination or a supplement.
Mm-hmm.
Many things that go into our food supply are not really demonstrated to be fully safe and nourishing, let alone healthy. And yet we continue to trust these authorities. And as we're seeing on every level, we're not really being led by people who have our best interests in mind.
No.
And it's not their fault, it's their choice. And it's not that there's some evil empire underneath it. It's really led by a single thing: profit. That's it, profit. It's more profitable to use high fructose corn syrup than it is to use cane sugar. It doesn't matter if it's healthy. It's fine to put sawdust in hamburger meat in fast food because it's not poisonous, and it certainly is cheaper than using actual animal products. But is it actually healthy for you? Have they studied it? How we study vaccinations. It's unethical to vaccinate an entire population and expose them to a pathogen of humans, to do this to a cross-section of humans. Vaccinate half, don't vaccinate the other half, expose them all to the same pathogen. It's unethical to do that.
Yeah.
Yet it's the only way to truly guarantee that these things are effective. Yet we will vaccinate an entire population and then surmise our safety and efficacy based on how many of those people get sick when there's no way of knowing how many of them get exposed. That in and of itself, and I'm not picking out vaccinations particularly, it's just a hot topic and an easy one to grab.
Yeah.
But we do the same thing with food dyes, and we do the same thing with pumping tetracycline into cattle. They urinate out tetracycline unchanged, sterilizing the soil, which we now know is not good for generating healthy plants.
No.
Actually, soil. So there's so many ways in which we have traded profitability for sustainability and healthy viability for not just us, but the generations that come after us. And one of the things I think we have a great responsibility. I think this is why plant medicine, psychedelics, ayahuasca, psilocybin, iboga, they're coming out and grabbing Westerners to say, is anybody home? Look, we need you, all hands on deck, to remember how to be in this world, because you're rapidly making it hard for you to stay. And you might take a lot of other innocent life forms off the planet with you if you don't wise up. Can you wise up in time before nature has to balance you out? Because, there's not a single being on this planet that is autonomous. We are all an ecosystem of, especially as me as a human being, trillions of other creatures. And as a matter of fact, there's more not my DNA in me than there is my DNA just in the bugs in my gut. And I need them. I couldn't live without them. Well, Earth is just a macro example of that very same thing. But even termites don't eat wood. They chew it up and swallow it, and bacteria in their gut digest it so that the termites get nourishment from that. We're all symbiotic, including Earth. And we don't even know the extent of what this planet is capable of doing in order to bring us back into balance. But I do know that it's happening. You can see it. You can feel it, in our ecosystem. And, will we get the message before it gets really ugly? I hope so.
I hope
I,
so too.
I
I
really
have
do.
faith. I have faith in humanity. I think the more of us that continue to speak up about this, and the more of us that continue to bound together, as one, it just takes time, and it takes work, and it takes repetition.
It does. And it takes people being willing to speak out regardless of what they're afraid of. Because right now,
yes.
there are more people who don't like the way things are being done in this country and on this planet, but they are afraid to speak up because the ones that they think are in control are frighteningly powerful and violent, and in ways that nobody wants to stand up and be canceled. But we, by and large, are going to start to get more and more vocal about it. And I just hope that whatever change needs to happen, that it happens peacefully as possible. Because we have not yet learned. I think one of the most important lessons that we've ignored as a species is that violence does not end violence. It never has.
No, it creates more generational trauma.
Yeah, which comes back as violence.
Yes.
And that would be my prayer. But anyway, there's so many different ways we can dive into this subject.
I have so many different thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll go back to integration a little bit, and maybe we'll slide back into all the other topics that we talk about and that kind of stem from all of this. What is one common misconception that you see when it comes to integration?
I think one of the most common misconceptions I see is that there's a singular path forward to integration, is that there's a singular way to do it, and that it is an event and not a process, that integration has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And my experience of that is only when the person is finally being laid to rest in whatever way their expired remains are taken care of. Integration is not complete. It's a daily opportunity to learn more from the experience, to even, integrate and embody what we've learned and what we're learning on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis in life, because it's not limited to the psychedelic experience. The work really begins when that ends. When the lights and colors fade, and here I am. I've tasted transcendence. I've met God, and now I've got to come home and do the laundry. And my email inbox is full, and there's bills to pay, and my partner, and my kids, and all the other things, and the boss, and the usual stressors, and then the unusual stressors. We got to live. And integration is not, just it's done in a day or it's done in a week. It's an ongoing process of paying attention, of tuning in.
Would you say integration truly never ends? It's a constant.
It never ends. It never ends, because there's always an opportunity in my day-to-day life to see, because once I'm aware I'm not the thought generator in my head, I'm actually the one who notices, then I have this opportunity to continue to deconstruct this false sense of self that has been created within me. Some of it I created, some of it was created for me by experiences and indoctrination in this cultured belief system that we have, called humanity, called America, called, fill in the blank on the small box group that you belong to, however you divide yourself, as by religion, by talent, by art, by whatever way we think that we are separated. And we start to deconstruct that and start to recognize that there's always an opportunity to learn more about who I am versus who I think I am. Because the truth of who I am is so much greater than who I think I am. Like Ram Dass said, number one was your loving awareness, having a human experience. And if you really think you're evolved, go spend a week with your family and you'll find out all the ways you still have work to do on deconstructing your triggers, your activations, the wounds. So maybe if you start young, but I don't think that's true, because I don't think a day goes by where we're not being asked to fall asleep into the sleepwalk of different aspects of our culture. So I also think it requires an integration is about staying awake and present to this moment. So I don't fall back into old patterns, old beliefs, old stories, old, reactivities, because we've built up a lot of them over the course of our lifetime. And, obviously you were a heck of a lot younger than me when you started working with psychedelics at 40. I had a lot to unwind and untangle in the jungle of my mind. Let me tell you, I walked into the jungle in South America, but really I walked into the jungle in between my ears. That was the scary jungle. The jungle in South America is actually beautiful.
I believe it. I'd like to go. I'm the same way. One of the events that happened at Rhythmia was the first day we got there. They said, close your eyes and envision your body as a temple. And for the first time in my life, I envisioned my body as a temple. And it was literally, a square building and neon lights above it. It said temple, right? And the T was flickering, the E was hanging off of the edge of one of the hooks. The door was off the hinges. The whole inside of it was just a fucking mess, right? And I was like, wow, is this real? And one of the nights that we had done the medicine and had gone through ceremony, I think it was actually the final night on Yahe night, and I closed my eyes and I looked at my temple and everything was remodeled and put back together. And it's something that I'll never forget. And probably about once or twice a week, I'll close my eyes and look at it again and just admire the beauty of it. And that's part of the whole ayahuasca experience that I don't think a lot of people understand into integration, is you really do learn to love yourself, which is so important. I have a few different friends from Costa Rica that maybe aren't taking integration as well, and I hear the word, it has rubbed off. I don't feel it anymore. What do you say to people after going through an experience that maybe say that to you? What's something that you've learned through all the different people that you have helped guide through integration? What are some tools to kind of maybe recoup that spark?
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for the segue into exactly, what the Integration Institute is about, which is really about how to restore the shine. Because what happens is when you're on the medicine, the psychedelic does the heavy lifting. It shuts down the default mode network. It shuts down the reactivity. It shuts down this false sense of self. And so here I am. Wow, I'm just this beautiful spirit here having this human experience. And then you come back to life, and that default mode network eventually comes back online, and your reactivities come back online, and your triggers come back online, and you think it's all faded. I need to go back and do more. No, it hasn't faded. You forgot. The most important part is, what do you do after you've met this mystery? And part of it is paying attention. Look, we have a 30-day course, self-guided. It's $198. It's the best gift you can give yourself or anybody who's integrating. It's daily practices, meditations, and tools. But if you can devote 5 minutes a day to breathing, 5 minutes a day, if you don't waste 5 minutes a day, you're a rare person indeed, where you can just sit down and focus inward. Feel the sense of your breath entering and leaving your body. Feel the sensation of the air entering through your nose or through your mouth. Feel your chest expand and contract. Become fully present to the machine that you're in. 5 minutes and pay attention to the thoughts that come, because it's the thoughts that drive the reactivity. It didn't wear off. You forgot to look in the right place. When I get caught back up in my thinking, I can drop back into old behavior easily, at least old loops of thinking. So, one of the most important things to restore that shine is to stop believing this shit talker between my ears is me. And my favorite tool for that is to become very present, which is using my breath and body awareness, body sensation, to come back to now. There's lots of ways to come back to now, but this one's easy. So we're not doing some meditation practice to leave our body. We're not meditating to make our mind shut up. We're not. We're just paying attention to our breath and being right here, right now, feeling it happen. And then watching the mind. Wow. He said that doing this would help, but I think this is bullshit. Okay, notice that. Notice that. Pay attention to that, but keep breathing.
Yeah, keep breathing out. Oh,
wow, but yet it seems to be getting quieter in there. 5 minutes a day, as often as you can. And every now and then, set a timer, just at random. And when that timer goes off, ask, where am I right now? Am I sitting here talking to Jesse in the middle of this podcast recording? Or am I thinking about what I'm doing in an hour, or what happened this afternoon, or whether my son is doing well at his soccer game? No, I'm right here, right now. And that's the key. The suffering is not what's happening in the moment. It's the story I'm telling myself, which is usually based on some past pain or future projection about what could happen. What if this recording doesn't go well? What if I say the wrong thing? All of the, the usual natural human things. It's not like we'll ever transcend all of our humanity until we leave this flesh and blood machine behind. Because the humanity that is you or I is this mind, which is literally a dream in the field of consciousness. Because there's just consciousness here that's me, consciousness here that's you. And then I have this appendage called a human body, which allows me to actually experience physical reality. And then it comes with a mind, which definitely is a magnificent tool. But it's not the only tool for driving the car. It's not my GPS for living. And that's where we've been confused as humans. I try to think my way through life. For a long time, I believed that life was a spreadsheet, a mathematical system of equations that I could solve and get the answers. And the great cosmic joke, as it was introduced to me once during an ayahuasca journey, was simply this: with a finite human mind and a finite human experience, to actually believe that I can solve any of these questions with my thinking mind is hysterical. It's laughable. All I can do is show up to the best of my ability right here and right now, and really acknowledge that I don't know what's happening next. I don't know where we came from. I don't know where we're going. I have an idea. And I believe that there's nothing here but consciousness, because scientifically we've only discovered that the only thing here is energy. Is that a fact? I have no proof of that. Not yet. I won't until I leave this body, and I won't be able to come back and tell you about it when I do.
No.
Yeah, that's the truth. But I do know that as long as I can be here fully and connect with human beings on this level, we have a chance of changing everything. But most importantly, we have a chance of recovering the truth of our whole and complete nature, which is what we were when we arrived: whole and complete, finite expressions of this infinite creative force underneath all this. So I know for a certainty is that there's a creative power underneath all this that is beyond comprehension. Just by looking around at nature and going, well, something is expressing itself here in a creative fashion that is so infinitely beyond comprehension. We're still discovering stuff. Not that we're the smartest being on the planet, and we haven't been at it for that long, but the deeper we look, the more we find new creatures and new things, and finding out how wrong we were about things of which we were so certain we were right. Because that's the other part about being human. is
Yeah.
being certain until something slaps us in the face and says, "Are you really sure about that now?" And that's what ayahuasca is for me. In the
Yeah.
beginning, it was like, "Are you looking? Pay attention here,
Yeah.
because you're off target."
It's all part of the journey. And as you described earlier, when your son is born in this world and he's that person, that's how every single one of us came into this world. We came into this world as the person that we are. And what we go through in our teens, into our 20s, into our 30s, and later on is exactly what's supposed to happen. And the reason why each one of us get introduced with ayahuasca or any other kind of psychedelic at certain points in our lives is exactly why it happens. You can't shoehorn somebody that's early in age because it worked for you to say, hey, go do this at 21, because they're not ready yet. The journey starts when you begin thinking about it. And I think the biggest thing that I took from what you had just said a little bit earlier about integration is really being present and being grounded. So much, and we talked about it earlier in the podcast here about chasing money. It's a constant money chase. That's what life is. And that's the misconception when it comes to life, is it's a competition, king of the hill. It's a game. Who can put out the vaccine the quickest? Who can put out the newest technology the fastest? Who can get that dollar first? And that's the rat race that we chase every single day. And it creates an ego. And that ego is then what is in the driver's seat in our mind between the ears, is essentially what you're saying. So,
And that's just one piece of what creates this false sense of self. There's also wounding and trauma, but our cultural belief system about what we think matters.
Yeah. And so long I was told, stop and smell the roses, and I never knew what that meant. And the day that my eyes opened, I remember opening, the sun coming up on Yahe night on Thursday night. It was a 12-hour ceremony till sunrise, right? And I remember everybody look on the other side of the Maloka, the sun will rise. And when the sun rose, the colors of the leaves, the colors of the flowers, the sky, everything had become vibrant, and I appreciated every single part of it. And that is what stopping and smelling the roses is.
You bet your ass it is. Yeah. I had a similar experience after doing a long dieta in the jungle with a master plant and a master shaman, my teacher. And I spent a few days up in Cusco and did a Wachuma ceremony at the top of the Sacred Valley.
Ooh, cool.
And this medicine came on when we went up there in the morning. So I didn't see the sunrise, but I saw the sunset. And just sitting there marveling at the variety of life and the beauty and the green and the colors and the sensation of just sitting there on the earth and seeing the magnificence of this great experience called life on earth.
Yeah, right. It's beautiful.
We forget the magic in the ordinary. We're sitting on this ball of rock. It's rock, it's metal, it's dirt, it's water, with the decayed remains of things that have lived and died before, and a thin envelope of atmosphere and sunlight shining down on it. And everything that you see in existence is birthed from that stardust that we're standing on. And we forget that very quickly.
Right.
We forget that sunlight hitting this earth is why everything that's here is in existence. People say, well, God made it. Well, all I can say is it's here. Whether it was made in that initial expression of thought becoming form, which physics, likes to describe as the Big Bang. But for all we know, it was the consciousness of God, as the Hebrew mystics talked about, splitting itself into the multitude of fragments to manifest creation. There's so many different stories about it, but all we know for certainty is that underneath it, there's only energy, and that physically it feels solid here. And with sunlight falling down on this ball of rock and dirt and water, we get life in every variety. And now we're here to even question what that is and where we come from. And if that's not magical to you, then you're too busy worried about what bills you got to pay.
The Kardashians.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So
yeah.
what
sad.
really matters. So when indigenous people look at us and go, you guys are crazy because you've created all these things. And not to say that the conveniences that we have aren't magical, but we've created them in such a way that they destroy the very world that births all of this. And we don't think twice about it, when really even your dog knows not to shit where he goes to sleep. We don't.
Yeah, we don't. That's true. That's sometimes that's an instinct that we lacked, isn't it? No.
We don't look that far ahead. We had,
No.
did we have any inklings that these things were dangerous? Well, some people would like to say that all these corporations that made all these products that eventually found were harmful may have had some idea. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but that wasn't their motivation, because everyone's looking at short-term gain and not lifelong. Like PFAs, we thought it was a good idea to create things that don't burn without a second thought for whether or not they're carcinogenic, toxic, whatever, because they're here forever. Well, maybe we might have had more foresight to say it might be convenient to make something that never sticks on a frying pan, but what are the consequences of creating substances that don't ever break down? Are they toxic? Are they dangerous?
Yeah.
Because if we do, we're making the sword that's going to kill ourselves.
In so many ways, that's such a great example too.
Right? Yeah.
When we talked previously, I don't remember you mentioning the temple of sound and source. What is that?
It's a spiritual community that's dedicated to mystical realism, which is basically the premise that consciousness is primary, that the human itself is actually a byproduct of chemistry, and neurology is a lie. That is the scientific view of things. But of course, you can't prove the existence of a soul. However, it takes some psychedelics long enough, and eventually you come face to face with it and go, wait a second. I can't prove that's here, but I know this is what it is. And, so we have a spiritual community, which is for people who have had this awakening and are looking for a connection. It's a religious organization, but it's a religious organization based on the premise that consciousness is primary, and that the essence of the great mystery is not as quantifiable or as measurable or as definable as has been handed to us over the course of time. And that it's a place to question what you think you know is truth and not be judged, criticized, or shunned for it. You are a Christian and you still want to explore this, you can. You're a Catholic, you're a Buddhist, you're a Muslim, you're none of the above, but you still want to explore this connection to the great mystery, to life, to nature. When I was a little kid, 95% of the population of the United States affiliated with some organized religion. And last I read, and don't quote me on this, but last I read, it was like down to 43% or 47%.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was mentioning earlier. Yeah.
That's a significant number. And it's not because people stop believing in, quote, God or this great mystery. It's because people stop believing in religion as the way to get there.
Mm-hmm.
They've just seen the lack of depth to it. And in many ways, the duplicity of the hierarchy of it. Because you are the connection to this great mystery. You are a finite expression of it. So this is why going inward will connect you with it, because you are a direct connection to that great mystery, being a finite expression of it. I kind of think of it as this way. You put a mirrored ball in the ceiling of a room, you shine one light on it, and you see a million reflections. Each one of them is a portion of the output, the light output of that original source. But none of them is the totality of it. And I see that all of existence is that very thing. And, it's spoken to on the nature of so above, so below, the outside, the inside, everything's in parity. For all we know, a human being is a collection of atoms. But for all we know, the Earth and the solar system is just one more atom in the fabric of something even larger. We have no idea the scope or the scale of physical reality, let alone the scope or the scale of non-physical reality. And as much as physical reality appears to be immeasurably infinite, we also know that there is the potential for there to be multiple dimensions of infinite, in which case there's different levels of infinity. And Dr. Donald Hoffman talks about this, is that there's different levels of infinity because there is an infinite containing an infinite. And if there's an infinite number of possibilities in physical reality, and that physical reality is just one dimension of many realities, then the term infinite doesn't really, and it can't, because by definition the nature of infinite is to be uncontainable.
Yeah.
And yet there's layers to infinite as well. As one of my friends, a favorite yogi, Nandaji, often says, there's the infinite, then there's the infinite infinite, and then there is the infinite infinite infinite. When the first time I heard him say that, I kind of chuckled, thinking that
Just
sounded
like I
kind of
did.
cool.
Yeah.
But actually it's not wrong. It's not wrong.
Is the Temple of Source and Sound now, is this a physical location?
Not yet. We're raising money to build a location, but right now
Okay.
it's an online organization where people can show up to connect in with a group of spiritually like-minded people. I think most of the people that will probably wind up finding their way to it are people who are entheo explorers, but not necessarily. Not necessarily. I think as it becomes more known as a place where people can just come to have a spiritual connection
Yeah.
to another human being without needing it to be under some dogmatic structure,
Sure.
because our only real understanding is this basic acceptance that there's a mystery underneath all this. There is.
Yeah.
But the fact is, all we know is that this is here for all of us to enjoy. And how do we connect with the spirit of that which created this magic place? The only evil in the world are people. Sorry. I know it's hard. It's hard for people to wrap their head around, but there's no supreme evil. The only evil that exists in this world are people acting out of their suffering, their pain, their trauma.
Some sort of possession.
They're attached to something.
Yeah, definitely.
So
this Temple of Sound and Source online right now, is it like a video chat where each person kind of shares and everybody listens, or is this led by you? Or
at the current time, it's a small community led by my wife and I.
Okay.
And really, it's about learning to live with what is, sharing about what's going on in our lives, getting perspective, getting guidance, and just basically having an opportunity to be seen by people outside of some dogmatic structure where they're going to be told what matters.
Yeah, right. Like a real life application, so to speak.
Yeah, application of presence and community.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Where do you see integration in psychedelic work going as far as your current projects and initiatives?
Our current initiative really is a training and mentoring program for psychedelic practitioners through the Integration Institute. We've had a lot of experience with that because we do believe that, one of the things that was for me, I didn't come to psychedelics looking to explore psychedelics. I came to psychedelics because 12-step therapy, pharmaceuticals, all of these things, all of these different modalities did not fix me. And still addiction took me down, and psychedelics were the doorway that opened it. But people don't come to psychedelics because everything in their life is rainbows and unicorns. And, if you go through the psychedelic experience and come out believing that life is rainbows and unicorns, that will fade too.
Yeah.
And then what do you do with that? It's like committed to the client outcome. People are coming to this work because it is like the last hurrah for them. Many people have been in such deep suffering for such a long time that they're willing to try anything, even these things that people have been scared of for decades.
Mm-hmm.
And we think that's important because they work and they help. But how to guide people so that they become self regulated emotionally resilient, connected to the truth of their own nature, which is loving awareness, here to bring forth into the world their finite creative expression of the infinite creative force underneath all of this, because that's why we're here.
Yeah.
We're not here to make money. We're not here to be famous. We're not here to get likes or followers. We've created all that as some definition of who we are. We're actually here to celebrate the magic of this place, to make love and to make mistakes, to burn toast and to make Ferraris and everything in between, you know?
Oh,
We're not here to be saints. We're not here to be sinners. We're not evil and we're not good. We're people learning to be the best version of ourselves, which is the most absolute, clear version of our own creative expression in the world. That's really why we're here. And to celebrate that and to bring that out in each other. In other words, to love and take care of each other and the earth, which births all of us. And it's a lot easier than what we've created. It's
yeah.
in our minds as to what we think this is about. Anyway.
So beautifully put. Do you have any final messages?
If you're suffering, there's a lot of ways out of the suffering, but just know something, that you were never broken from the beginning, from the moment you got here. No matter what traumas you've experienced, no matter what suffering you've been through, no matter how far down the ladder of life you think you have dropped, the truth of your loving awareness, your whole and complete nature, is guaranteed by the fact that you're here. So don't let that stop you, whether it's psychedelics or therapy, whether it's breath work or yoga, whether it's a float tank or kayaking in the Pacific, whatever it is. Connect to the truth of you, and there's lots of people who can help you do that. And if I can be of any help, you can find me at TIIPC.com and the Temple of Sound and Source. You can find me on Substack. I write about these things. I think it's the most important gift. For me, the most important mission I got from working with psychedelic plant medicine was to leave notes. Leave notes for the ones that come later so they don't have to discover it the hard way. It also came from a bedtime story we used to read to our son when he was 5, 6, and 7. And it's called I Think You Are Here. And at the end, it says you're going to go through all these things in life and you're going to learn, and you're going to grow, and you're going to experience. But the most important thing you can do is leave notes for the ones that come after. And as you can see by the snow on the dome, I'm 64.
Yeah.
I don't have an infinite number of days left, and I'm doing my best to try and leave notes for as many people who care to hear them as possible.
You're carrying out your purpose, and that's essentially, I would say, the dream. And that's myself. What I'm finding is I'm finding that purpose. So it's so inspirational to see you talk about all of this. And I want to thank you so much for your time today. And I will be sure to also include your Substack in the description, and we'll put your website in there. Is there any other social media links that
I'll give you social media links. I'll give you my link tree. Just
sure.
Just give me a copy of this so I can check it out before you publish it, in case I say, I don't really want to say that, or it doesn't sound right.
Sure. Of course.
But I do want to say, Jesse, thank you so much.
Thank
you so much for connecting and having this conversation. And I hope it sparks another, and I hope it helps you discover the spark of you and why you're here. I get a sense from the look in your eyes that you're living it. So
yeah, that's great. It's truly a gift, and I'm so grateful for everything. So thank you again, Howard.
You're welcome. Thank you, Jesse. Have a great night.